The wind howled like a wounded animal outside my window as I stared at the ceiling of my cramped quarters. 3 months into my contract at the Polaris Research Facility, and I still couldn't get used to the endless Arctic night. The digital clock on my nightstand read 3:17 a.m., though time felt meaningless in a place where the sun wouldn't rise for another month. My name is Jack Monroe, and I took this job because the pay was exceptional, and frankly, I needed to disappear for a while. After 8 years in private security following my military discharge, I'd burned out. The Polaris gig seemed perfect, remote, straightforward, and lucrative. Guard an isolated research facility, keep the scientists safe from polar bears and the occasional Arctic fox. Simple. That's what I thought, anyway. I pushed myself out of bed, knowing sleep wouldn't come. Might as well start my patrol early. The facility was an architectural marvel, considering its location. A sprawling complex, built partially underground, with reinforced structures rising from the ice like geometric icebergs. The main building housed the living quarters, common areas, and primary labs, while outlying structures contained specialized research spaces and equipment storage. The halls were eerily quiet as I made my rounds, my footsteps echoing on the polished floors. Most of the facility was dark, illuminated only by the dim emergency lighting that outlined the corridors like blue veins. I'd memorized the layout within my first week, not difficult considering the areas I was permitted to access. That was the first red flag. Nearly 30% of the facility was restricted, even to security personnel. Dr. Eleanor Frost, the project director, had explained it away as proprietary research areas when I first arrived. Standard procedure for private sector scientific endeavors, she'd assured me, but I'd worked security for research institutions before, and this level of compartmentalization was unusual. As I approached the main laboratory wing, I noticed light spilling from beneath a door. Lab 3, Dr. Frost's personal domain. At this hour, most scientists should have been asleep. The facility ran on a strict schedule to maintain psychological well-being in the extreme environment. I paused outside the door, listening. Voices murmured within, Dr. Frost's clipped tones and the deeper rumble of Dr. Isaiah Reynolds, the microbiologist. I couldn't make out their words, but the tension in their voices was unmistakable. I knocked firmly. The voices ceased immediately. After a moment, the door opened just enough for Dr. Frost to peer out. Her normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark shadows beneath her eyes. Monroe, you're not on duty for another 3 hours. Her voice was steady, professional, but her knuckles were white on the door frame. Couldn't sleep, ma'am. Thought I'd get an early start. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of Dr. Reynolds hunched over a microscope, his broad shoulders tense. On a nearby monitor, something moved, something that made my skin crawl, though I couldn't quite see what it was. Dr. Frost stepped into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind her. Everything's fine here. Perhaps you could check the perimeter sensors. We've been getting some anomalous readings from the eastern quadrant. It was a dismissal, and we both knew it, but I was being paid to follow orders, not question them. Yes, ma'am. As I turned to leave, Dr. Frost called after me, Monroe, the integrity of our work here is paramount. I trust you understand the importance of discretion. I nodded, but as I walked away, the knot in my stomach tightened. Something wasn't right at Polaris, and that something had the project director working in secret at 3 a.m. The eastern sensor array was functioning perfectly, as I'd expected. The anomalous readings were a diversion, though from what, I couldn't say. I spent the remainder of my shift watching the endless snow swirl in the floodlights outside the main entrance, my mind churning over what I'd seen. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention to the researchers. There were 15 in total, plus support staff, maintenance, kitchen, medical, bringing our population to 28 souls, isolated on the edge of the world. Dr. Frost and her core team of 5 senior researchers were working increasingly erratic hours. They looked exhausted, strung out. Dr. Katsuo Yamamoto, our climatologist, had developed a persistent tremor in his right hand. Dr. Julia Morris, the biochemist, had lost enough weight that her clothes hung from her frame. The support staff noticed too, though no one spoke of it openly. Conversations in the mess hall would quiet when any of the senior researchers entered. An atmosphere of unease had settled over Polaris like a fog. My first real break came from an unexpected source. Liam Cooper was a lab technician, young and eager, still excited about his first major research position. I'd made a point of being friendly with him. He seemed the most likely to let something slip. We were in the recreation room, playing chess. Most of the facility was already in their quarters, but Liam had been avoiding sleep lately. "Checkmate," I said, moving my rook into position. Liam sighed, knocking over his king. "I'm too distracted for this game." "Work trouble." I kept my tone casual, resetting the pieces. He glanced toward the door before answering. "You ever wonder what we're really doing here, Monroe?" "Studying climate patterns and microbial adaptation in extreme environments, that's what my briefing said." Liam gave a humorless laugh. "Yeah, that was mine too." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "But that's not what's in Core Lab 1. That's not what has Dr. Frost looking like she hasn't slept in a week." "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "I shouldn't talk about it, but..." He hesitated, conflict clear on his young face. "They found something in the ice, something old. They brought up core samples from 2 miles down, and there was something in them. Dormant microorganisms, they said. Ancient bacteria preserved in the ice for millions of years. Isn't that exactly what we're supposed to be studying?" "Not like this." Liam's hands trembled slightly as he lined up the chess pieces. "These organisms, they're like nothing anyone's ever seen. The structure, the way they..." He trailed off, looking sick. "I've only glimpsed the data. Cooper doesn't have clearance for the actual samples, but I've seen what they do to living tissue. It's not normal." Before he could elaborate, the recreation room door swung open. Dr. Reynolds stood there, his massive frame filling the doorway. His eyes settled on Liam, narrowing slightly. "Cooper, you're needed in Lab 2. Liam stood immediately, his face draining of color. "Yes, doctor, right away." As he hurried out, Dr. Reynolds turned his attention to me. There was something off about his gaze, too intense, almost feverish. "You should get some rest, Monroe. Security needs to be at its best." His voice was oddly formal, each word carefully enunciated. After he left, I sat alone in the recreation room for a long time, replaying Liam's words in my mind. Ancient organisms preserved in ice. It sounded like the plot of a science fiction film, not something that would have an entire research team on edge. I didn't see Liam for the next 2 days. When I asked about him, I was told he'd been reassigned to a different shift. It felt like a warning. The turning point came a week later. I was conducting my evening patrol when the facility's lights flickered momentarily. Nothing unusual. The harsh Arctic conditions often affected our power systems, but it was enough to temporarily disable the electronic locks on a storage room I'd never been able to access before. I hesitated only briefly before slipping inside. The room was filled with medical equipment, IV stands, monitoring devices, pharmaceutical supplies. It looked like a field hospital waiting to be assembled. Why would a research facility focused on microbiology need this level of medical infrastructure? As I was about to leave, I noticed a logbook on a desk near the door. Flipping it open, I found a list of names, facility personnel, with dates and strange notations beside them. Stage 1, Stage 2, and so on. 5 names were marked terminal phase. Liam Cooper's name was on the list, recently added, marked Stage 1. A noise in the corridor sent me hurrying out, but not before I snapped photos of the logbook pages with my phone. Back in my quarters, I examined them more closely. The implications were disturbing. This wasn't a research project, it was a quarantine situation, or worse, an outbreak. The next morning, Dr. Frost announced that Dr. Yamamoto had been evacuated for medical reasons. No further explanation was offered. I watched the faces of the senior researchers during the announcement. No surprise, no concern, just grim acceptance. That night, I used my security clearance to access the communications center. If something dangerous was happening at Polaris, the parent company, Arctic Frontier Innovations, needed to know. But when I tried to send a message through our satellite link, I found all outgoing communications were being routed through Dr. Frost's office for approval. We weren't just physically isolated, we were being informationally quarantined as well. I needed to see what was in Core Lab 1. Security officers were not allowed access, but the facility's ventilation system offered an alternative route. Maintenance tunnels ran throughout Polaris, allowing repair crews to access the complex environmental systems that kept us alive in the brutal Arctic conditions. It took me 3 days to map a viable path through the maintenance tunnels to an access point near Core Lab 1. During those days, 2 more staff members disappeared, a kitchen worker and a junior researcher. The official explanation was medical evacuation, but no one had heard aircraft landing, and the condition outside would have made evacuation nearly impossible anyway. The facility was operating with a skeleton crew now. Those remaining moved through the halls like ghosts, eyes down, speaking in whispers. The mess hall was always half empty. Dr. Frost had stopped making public appearances altogether. Finally, on a night when the Arctic wind screamed loud enough to mask any sounds I might make, I made my move. The maintenance tunnels were cramped and freezing, designed for necessity rather than comfort. I crawled through them for nearly an hour, following my memorized route until I reached the vent overlooking Core Lab 1. What I saw through the grate made my blood run cold. The lab had been transformed into a containment facility. 6 transparent isolation chambers lined the walls, each containing a bed and medical equipment. 4 were occupied. I recognized Dr. Yamamoto in one, though I almost wished I didn't. His skin had taken on a grayish tinge, and dark veins stood out starkly against it. He lay motionless, connected to monitoring equipment that beeped steadily. In another chamber, Liam Cooper paced restlessly. His movements were jerky, uncoordinated, like a marionette with tangled strings. Occasionally, he would stop and press his hands against the transparent wall, staring outward with eyes that seemed too dark, too large in his gaunt face. Dr. Frost stood in the center of the room, speaking with Dr. Morris and another researcher I didn't recognize. Their voices were too low for me to hear, but Dr. Frost's gestures were emphatic, angry. She pointed repeatedly at a large, cylindrical container at the far end of the lab, some kind of pressurized storage unit. As I watched, Dr. Morris approached one of the isolation chambers. The occupant, I couldn't tell who it was, began thrashing violently. Dr. Morris pressed a button on a nearby console, and a gas hissed into the chamber. The thrashing slowed, then stopped. I had seen enough. Whatever was happening in Core Lab 1 went far beyond proprietary research. People were being contained, perhaps experimented on. I needed to get help. As I began backing away from the vent, my elbow struck the metal wall of the tunnel. The sound wasn't loud, but in the quiet lab, it might as well have been a gunshot. Dr. Frost's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the ceiling. She said something to Dr. Morris, who nodded and moved quickly to a wall-mounted phone. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I scrambled backward through the tunnel, no longer caring about noise. I needed to get to the communications center, needed to break through the restrictions and get a message out. I had almost reached the junction that would lead me back to the main facility when I heard movement in the tunnel ahead. Flashlight beams swept the narrow space. Monroe, Dr. Reynolds' voice echoed metallically. "We know you're in here. There's nowhere to go." He was right. The tunnels offered no alternate routes from my position. I was trapped. "I just want to talk," Reynolds continued, his voice eerily calm. "You've seen something you don't understand. Let us explain." I remained silent, pressing myself against the cold metal wall. The flashlight beams drew closer. "The organism we discovered," Reynolds said conversationally, as if we were chatting in the mess hall. "It's remarkable, ancient beyond comprehension, yet incredibly sophisticated. It can adapt to any host, rewrite biology on a cellular level. Imagine the possibilities, Monroe. Medical applications alone could revolutionize humanity." His voice had changed subtly as he spoke, developing an unusual cadence, almost musical in its rhythm. Of course, there have been challenges. The organism has a will of its own, a purpose we're still deciphering. Some of our colleagues have struggled with the symbiosis process. The flashlight beam found me, blinding in the darkness. I raised a hand to shield my eyes. There you are. Dr. Reynolds stood a few meters away, flanked by 2 security officers I recognized, Adams and Pator. All 3 looked wrong somehow, their postures too rigid, movements too precise. Their eyes reflected the flashlight beam like animals in the night. "Come with us, Monroe," Reynolds said, extending a hand. "Dr. Frost wants to speak with you." "What happened to Yamamoto?" I demanded. "And Cooper, what did you do to them?" Reynolds sighed. "They're adapting. Some bodies accept the change more readily than others. Yamamoto, his system rejected the initial integration, but we're learning with each attempt. You're experimenting on your own people. We're advancing human evolution," Reynolds countered, his voice taking on a fervent quality. "The organism doesn't destroy, Monroe. It transforms, enhances. Those who successfully bond with it gain abilities beyond imagination." As he spoke, he removed his glove. His hand was no longer entirely human. The skin had darkened to a bluish gray, and the fingers were elongated, the joints strangely articulated. "See," he flexed his transformed hand. "Stronger, more efficient, better adapted to cold. And that's just the beginning." I had no doubt that Reynolds believed what he was saying. The question was whether it was actually him speaking or whatever had been found in the ice. If it's so beneficial, why the secrecy? Why are people being locked in isolation chambers? The transition can be disorienting, Reynolds admitted. Some resist the changes instinctively. Their minds fight what their bodies are becoming. It's a natural response to transformation. And the ones who don't make it, the terminal phase cases. A flicker of something, regret, fear, crossed Reynolds' face. Casualties of progress, unavoidable in pioneering work. I was running out of options. 3 of them, one of me, in a confined space with no escape routes. "I'll come with you," I said finally. "I want to hear what Dr. Frost has to say." Reynolds smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. A wise choice. They escorted me through the maintenance tunnels back to the main facility. As we emerged, I noticed the lights were dimmer than usual, the air colder. Had the environmental systems been adjusted, or was it preparation for whatever the organism preferred? Instead of taking me to Dr. Frost's office, they led me deeper into the restricted section, past laboratories I'd never seen before. The few staff we passed averted their eyes, hurrying in the opposite direction. I counted 3 people who still looked normal, untransformed. The rest showed subtle signs of change. That unnatural stillness, the too deliberate movements, eyes that reflected light oddly. Finally, we reached a large laboratory I hadn't glimpsed through the vent. This seemed to be the heart of the operation. Massive freezer units lined one wall, presumably containing ice core samples. Workstations were arranged in a circle around a central platform, where a cylindrical container stood, larger than the one I'd seen before, with frost coating its metallic surface. Dr. Frost stood beside it, making notes on a tablet. She looked up as we entered, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Monroe, I understand you've been exploring our facility without authorization." "I've been doing my job," I replied, "assessing threats to personnel safety. I'd say unwilling human experimentation qualifies." She sighed, setting down her tablet. "That's a simplistic interpretation of complex work. Please sit." She gestured to a chair beside one of the workstations. I remained standing. "What's in the ice, Dr. Frost?" "Life." Her eyes lit up with genuine passion. "Life that predates humanity by millions of years. An organism that survived in suspended animation while continents shifted and species rose and fell. When we first discovered it, we thought it was merely an interesting microbiological specimen. Then we observed what it did to living tissue." "You mean how it takes over human hosts?" "That's your fear talking." She approached me slowly, as if calming a frightened animal. "The organism doesn't take over. It integrates, enhances. It's a symbiotic relationship, not parasitic. Tell that to the people locked in isolation chambers." Transitional housing, she corrected. The integration process requires monitoring. Some experience psychological resistance. And the terminal phase cases. What happens to them? Dr. Frost's expression hardened. You've seen restricted documents. I've seen enough to know you're playing with something you don't understand, and people are dying because of it. A few failures don't negate the potential benefits, she snapped. This organism could be the key to extending human lifespan, enhancing our capabilities, allowing us to survive in environments currently lethal to our species. Imagine human colonies on Mars, in deep ocean trenches, in the most extreme environments on Earth, all possible because of what we've discovered here. As she spoke, I noticed Dr. Reynolds moving to block the laboratory door. Adams and Pator flanked me, cutting off any potential escape route. You've reached a decision point, Monroe, Dr. Frost continued. You can join us willingly in this evolutionary step forward, or... She didn't need to finish the sentence. The alternative was clear enough. And if I agree, what happens then? We introduce you to the organism in a controlled setting. The initial integration takes approximately 24 hours. You might experience fever, disorientation, vivid dreams. Your body will begin adapting. Enhanced strength, improved cold tolerance, accelerated healing. Your mind will expand to accommodate new patterns of thought. And if I refuse? Dr. Frost's smile was thin. Then we proceed without your cooperation. The result is the same, though the process can be more traumatic when resisted. I was out of time and options. Whatever was happening at Polaris, I couldn't stop it alone. My only hope was to play along and look for an opportunity to escape or send a warning to the outside world. I want to understand better before I decide, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. Show me the organism. Let me see what I'd be signing up for. Dr. Frost studied me for a long moment, then nodded. A reasonable request. She gestured toward the cylindrical container on the central platform. Come, see what the future looks like. I approached cautiously, aware of Reynolds, Adams, and Pator watching my every move. Dr. Frost pressed her palm against a scanner on the container's surface. With a hiss of releasing pressure, a section of the cylinder retracted, revealing a smaller containment unit inside. This inner chamber was transparent, filled with a clear fluid in which something moved. Something dark and fluid, constantly shifting form. This is just a small sample, Dr. Frost explained, pride evident in her voice. The primary mass remains in the deep storage facility beneath the lab. Even this small amount is capable of initiating human transformation. The substance in the container seemed to respond to our presence, pressing against the transparent barrier as if curious. It wasn't solid, nor truly liquid, more like a constantly moving gelatin that could thin itself to a film or gather into a denser mass. What is it? I asked, unable to hide my revulsion. We believe it's a colonial organism, similar in some ways to slime molds on Earth, but vastly more complex. It communicates internally through electrical impulses, analogous to a neural network. It learns, adapts, and when introduced to a human host, it integrates with our neural and cellular systems, creating a true symbiotic relationship. As if responding to her words, the organism pressed more insistently against the container wall facing me. Its movements became more agitated, more purposeful. It seems interested in you, Dr. Frost observed. That's a good sign. Compatibility appears high. I stepped back involuntarily, and everyone on the research team has been integrated with this thing. Most of us, yes. Those who showed the highest probability of successful bonding went first. Dr. Reynolds was among the pioneers. She glanced at him with something like pride. His integration was nearly perfect. Reynolds smiled at the acknowledgement, and I noticed how his teeth seemed subtly altered, slightly sharper with an unnatural bluish tinge to the enamel. The benefits became apparent immediately, Dr. Frost continued. Enhanced physical capabilities, accelerated cognitive processing, improved cellular regeneration. Some of us have developed more specialized adaptations. Like what? Instead of answering, she pulled up her sleeve. The skin of her forearm was mottled with the same bluish-gray coloration I'd seen on Reynolds' hand, but more extensive. As I watched, the discoloration shifted slightly, like a ripple moving beneath the surface. "The organism adjusts our biology to fit our needs and environment," she explained. "My specialty is cold environment adaptation. The organism has modified my skin to better retain heat and resist frostbite." I struggled to keep the horror from my expression. They believed they were being enhanced, but all I could see was human bodies being colonized by an alien parasite. "I need time to think," I said. Dr. Frost frowned. "I'm afraid time is a luxury we don't have. The integration process works best when the host is healthy and unstressed. Your current psychological state is suboptimal but acceptable." She nodded to Reynolds and the others. Before I could react, Adams grabbed my arms from behind while Pator approached with something that looked like a medical injector. I fought instinctively, driving my elbow back into Adams's solar plexus. He grunted, but didn't release his grip. His strength was inhuman, his fingers digging into my arms with bruising force. "This resistance is counterproductive," Dr. Frost said calmly as I struggled. "The integration will happen regardless. Fighting only makes it more difficult for your body to adapt." Pator pressed the injector against my neck. There was a cold hiss, and immediately my limbs began to feel heavy, unresponsive. "A mild sedative," Dr. Frost explained as my struggles weakened. "You'll remain conscious for the procedure. It's important that your mind is active during initial integration." Through increasingly blurred vision, I watched as she returned to the containment unit. Her movements were precise, clinical, as she extracted a portion of the organism, a dark, viscous droplet that clung to the specialized tool she used. "The entry point matters," she explained conversationally as Pator and Adams forced me into a chair, securing my arms with restraints. "The spine offers direct access to the central nervous system, but the process is excruciatingly painful and risks permanent damage if the subject struggles. The bloodstream is slower but more reliable." She approached with the droplet of the organism contained in what looked like a modified syringe. The substance inside seemed to pulse with anticipation. "This will sting initially," she warned. "Then you'll feel a spreading warmth as the organism begins moving through your system. Some experience it as euphoric, others find it deeply unsettling. Either reaction is normal." I pulled against the restraints frantically, but the sedative had robbed my muscles of their strength. Dr. Frost found a vein in my arm and positioned the syringe. Just as the needle touched my skin, a deafening alarm blared throughout the facility. Dr. Frost froze, her head snapping up. "Containment breach in deep storage," an automated voice announced over the intercom. "Biohazard protocols activated. All personnel proceed to emergency stations." Dr. Frost's face paled. "That's impossible. The primary mass is secured in multiple containment fields." Reynolds was already moving toward a computer terminal. "Environmental readings from deep storage are spiking. Temperature increase, pressure fluctuations. Something's wrong with the cooling system." "Lock it down," Dr. Frost ordered, setting aside the syringe containing the organism droplet. "Activate the emergency bulkheads." As Reynolds worked, the lights in the laboratory flickered, then switched to emergency backup, casting everything in a dim red glow. "Power fluctuations across the facility," Reynolds reported tensely. "The primary generator is failing." "How?" Dr. Frost demanded. "The system was inspected yesterday." No one had an answer, but I had a sinking suspicion. If the organism was as intelligent as they claimed, if it could communicate across its distributed parts, what if it had planned this? What if the sample in the lab had somehow signaled to the main mass? The alarms continued wailing. Through the laboratory windows, I could see people running in the corridor, panic evident in their movements. "Adams, Pator, get to deep storage. Assess the situation," Dr. Frost ordered. They hesitated, looking uncertain. Even through my sedative-induced haze, I could tell they were afraid. "Now," Dr. Frost snapped. They left reluctantly, leaving me secured to the chair with only Dr. Frost and Reynolds remaining in the lab. "We need to evacuate." Reynolds said, his voice tense. "If the primary mass has breached containment." "No," Dr. Frost cut him off. "We contain this. The work is too important to abandon." Another alarm joined the first, this one higher pitched and more urgent. "Atmospheric contamination detected," the automated system announced. "Airborne particulates exceed safety thresholds. Respirators required in all common areas." Dr. Frost and Reynolds exchanged alarmed looks. "It's becoming aerosol," Reynolds said, horror dawning on his face. "That wasn't supposed to be possible until stage 4 integration." "It's adapting faster than we predicted," Dr. Frost replied. She turned to a cabinet and retrieved respirator masks, securing one over her own face before tossing one to Reynolds. In their concern for themselves, they seemed to have forgotten about me. The restraints on the chair were sturdy but designed for medical procedures, not security. With the sedative slowly wearing off, I might have a chance to escape, if I could get free before they remembered my existence. I worked at the restraint on my right wrist, trying to slide my hand through the gap. The facility shuddered around us, as if struck by some massive force. "Structural integrity compromised in sections C through E," the automated voice reported calmly. "Emergency bulkheads engaged." "That's the residential wing," Reynolds said. "If the bulkheads are down, anyone still there is on their own," Dr. Frost finished grimly. "We need to secure the samples and research data. Everything else is secondary." My fingers found the release catch on the restraint. With agonizing slowness, I pressed it, feeling the cuff loosen fractionally. Not enough to slip free, but a start. A heavy impact somewhere above us sent dust raining from the ceiling. The laboratory door slid open, and Adams staggered in, or what remained of Adams. His face was barely recognizable, the skin stretched and discolored, eyes sunken and glowing faintly in the red emergency lighting. Dark veins pulsed visibly beneath his skin. "Mass, free," he gasped. His voice was wrong, deeper, resonant, with an unnatural echo. "Coming this way." Dr. Frost backed away from him. "Adams, are you still you?" He tilted his head at an impossible angle, neck bending farther than human anatomy should allow. "Adams, part of greater whole now, as you will be." "Where's Pator?" Reynolds demanded. Adams' face split in what might have been intended as a smile. "Joined, all join, all become one." While their attention was fixed on the transformed Adams, I managed to free my right hand. Moving as subtly as possible, I began working on the left restraint. Dr. Frost had backed up to a cabinet where she was frantically gathering items, data drives, sample containers. "Reynolds," she called, "activate the emergency purge sequence. Authorization Frost, Omega 97. Reynolds hesitated. "That will incinerate the entire facility. Better that than letting it escape into the world." Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she worked. "We underestimated it. We can't control it." Adams took a shambling step forward. No escape, no separation, only unity now. Reynolds moved to a wall-mounted terminal, entering commands with trembling fingers. "Purge sequence requires dual authorization." "Override protocol Reynolds Delta 6-3, Dr. Frost replied without looking up. "Emergency purge initiated," the automated system announced. "Facility-wide sterilization will commence in 15 minutes. All personnel proceed to emergency evacuation vehicles." I freed my left hand just as Adams lunged toward Reynolds. The movement was uncannily fast, more insect than human. Reynolds screamed as Adams seized him, fingers digging into his shoulders. "Why fight?" Adams' distorted voice asked. "Already part of us, just incomplete. Let us finish." Whatever had happened to Adams, whatever stage of integration he represented, it was clearly beyond the controlled transformations of Dr. Frost and Reynolds. This was what happened when the organism took full control. Dr. Frost was backing toward a door at the rear of the laboratory, clutching a bag filled with what I assumed were research materials. Her eyes met mine briefly, and I saw recognition of my freed state, followed by the decision to save herself rather than recapture me. She slipped through the door as Adams overwhelmed Reynolds. I heard their combined screams, Reynolds in pain and terror, Adams in what sounded horribly like ecstasy. I didn't stay to watch whatever was happening. With the restraints off, I pushed to my feet, fighting the lingering effects of the sedative. The corridor outside the lab was chaos. Emergency lighting bathed everything in crimson, and the air was thick with a fine mist that seemed to glitter in the dim light. Through open doors, I glimpsed abandoned laboratories, equipment scattered as if people had fled in panic. 14 minutes until emergency purge, the automated voice reminded pleasantly. I needed to find an evacuation vehicle. The facility had snowcats and all-terrain vehicles in the garage bay, but that was on the other side of the complex. With sections sealed by emergency bulkheads, the direct route would be impassable. My security training kicked in. There would be emergency equipment caches throughout the facility. I needed a respirator first. The glittering mist in the air was almost certainly the aerosolized organism. I found an emergency station at a corridor junction. Smashing the glass, I retrieved a respirator and fastened it over my face. There was no way to know if it would actually filter out the organism, but it was better than nothing. As I moved through the facility, I encountered more transformed personnel, some still recognizably human but moving with that unnatural coordination, others further gone, their bodies distorted in ways that defied biology. They pursued me with single-minded purpose, but seemed weakened, uncoordinated, as if the transformation process had left them physically compromised. I evaded them where possible, fought when necessary. My military training gave me an advantage in close quarters, but each encounter left me more exhausted. The sedative was still affecting me, and without a clear route, I was burning precious time. 10 minutes until emergency purge. I reached a junction that should have led to the garage bay, only to find the passage blocked by a sealed bulkhead. The control panel beside it was dark. The power was out in this section. Backtracking, I took an alternative route through the maintenance levels. The narrow passages were claustrophobic but mercifully empty. Most of the transformed personnel seemed drawn to populated areas, hunting the remaining untransformed humans. As I navigated the maintenance tunnels, I heard noises above and around me, scraping, thumping, and occasional high-pitched keening that set my teeth on edge. The organism was spreading through the facility's infrastructure, using ventilation ducts and utility conduits to bypass the bulkheads. 7 minutes until emergency purge. I emerged from the maintenance tunnel into a corridor near the medical wing. The air here was thick with the glittering mist, swirling in eddies around my feet as I moved. Through windows in the corridor, I could see into what had once been the infirmary. It had been transformed into something else entirely. The walls and floor were covered with a pulsating, iridescent film that reminded me of the organism in its containment unit, but vastly expanded. Medical equipment had been absorbed into the growth, twisted and repurposed in ways I couldn't comprehend. And in the center of it all, suspended in a cocoon of the shimmering substance, was Dr. Yamamoto, or what remained of him. His body had been grotesquely transformed, limbs elongated and twisted, skin translucent enough that I could see dark matter pulsing through his veins. His eyes were open, but had changed to obsidian pools that reflected the emergency lighting in hypnotic patterns. Most disturbing of all, he was conscious. His head turned as I passed the window, those black eyes fixing on me with terrifying recognition. His mouth opened in what might have been a smile, revealing teeth that had fused into ridged plates. I tore my gaze away and continued down the corridor. Whatever Yamamoto had become, he was beyond help now. 5 minutes until emergency purge. The garage bay had to be close. I rounded a corner and found myself facing another sealed bulkhead. This one had a functioning control panel, but required security clearance I didn't possess. As I contemplated my options, I heard footsteps behind me. Turning, I saw Dr. Frost hurrying down the corridor, clutching her bag of research materials. She froze when she saw me. Monroe, her voice was muffled by her respirator, but I could hear the surprise. "You escaped." "Seems we both did," I replied, nodding to the bulkhead. "Any chance you've got clearance for this door?" She hesitated, calculating her options. "I do, but evacuation vehicles are limited. Not everyone will make it out." 4 minutes until emergency purge. Seems to me we both have better chances together than alone, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. You open the door, we find a vehicle, we both get out of here. Simple. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded tersely. Stand back from the panel. I complied, watching carefully as she placed her palm on the scanner. The display flashed green, and the bulkhead began to rise with agonizing slowness. Before it had lifted more than a foot, something slammed into it from the other side, denting the metal inward. Dr. Frost stumbled backward as another impact shook the door. "What the hell is that?" I demanded. "The primary mass," she whispered, fear evident in her voice. "It's intelligent. It knows we're trying to escape." A third impact bent the bulkhead further, creating a gap at the bottom large enough to see through. Through it, I glimpsed something massive and dark, pulsating with internal light, spreading across the floor of the garage bay beyond. 3 minutes until emergency purge. Dr. Frost backed away from the damaged bulkhead. "It's cut off our escape route. We need another way out." "What about the roof? Do we have aircraft?" She shook her head. "No, the weather makes air travel too unreliable." She thought for a moment. "There's an emergency bunker beneath the facility. It's designed to withstand extreme conditions, including the purge sequence. How do we reach it?" "Access is through the security center, this way." I followed her back down the corridor, away from the damaged bulkhead. Behind us, I heard metal groaning as the organism continued its assault on the door. The security center was 2 levels down, accessible through a stairwell that had so far escaped contamination. Dr. Frost moved with purpose, her earlier fear replaced by determination. 2 minutes until emergency purge. As we descended the stairs, Dr. Frost stumbled, catching herself on the railing. In the dim light, I noticed her hand. The strange mottling had spread, now covering most of her visible skin. "Your integration," I said. "It's accelerating." She glanced at her hands, a mixture of fear and fascination crossing her face. "The organism in the air. It's advancing the process, completing what was started." "Can you fight it?" She let out a strained laugh. "Fight evolution. The organism doesn't destroy, Monroe. It transforms. Makes us better." Her voice had taken on that strange cadence I'd heard from Reynolds. "I can feel it changing me from within, rebuilding me. The fear is just the human part resisting." I backed away, keeping distance between us. "Stay focused, Dr. Frost. We need to reach the bunker." She shook her head as if clearing it. "Yes, the bunker. This way." We continued downward, but her movements became increasingly erratic. She would stop suddenly, staring at nothing, then resume at a quicker pace. I stayed a few steps behind her, watching for signs that she was losing control. 1 minute until emergency purge. The security center was abandoned when we reached it, monitors displaying empty corridors throughout the facility. On several screens I could see the organism spreading, flowing across floors and walls, absorbing equipment and furniture into its expanding mass. Dr. Frost moved to a terminal, entering commands with trembling fingers. A section of the floor retracted, revealing a staircase leading further down. "There," she said, her voice noticeably deeper now, resonating strangely. "The emergency bunker." I approached cautiously. "After you." She smiled, and I noted with horror that her teeth had begun the same transformation I'd seen in Reynolds, becoming sharper, taking on that bluish tinge. "No, I don't think so," she replied, backing away from the open hatch. "I'm not going down there." 30 seconds until emergency purge. "What are you talking about?" "The facility is about to be incinerated." She laughed, a sound that echoed unnaturally in the small space. "The organism will survive. It survived for millions of years in the ice, adapted to conditions that would kill any other life form. Fire is just another adaptation waiting to happen." The change in her was accelerating visibly now. Dark veins pulsed beneath her increasingly translucent skin. Her movements became more fluid, less human. 20 seconds until emergency purge. I had no time to argue or fight. With a final glance at Dr. Frost, or what she was becoming, I dove for the open hatch, scrambling down the stairs. Behind me, I heard her voice, now barely recognizable. "It will find you, Monroe. In the end, it finds everyone." I slammed the hatch closed above me, spinning the manual lock. The staircase led to a reinforced door marked Emergency Shelter. I pulled it open and hurried inside. 10 seconds until emergency purge. The bunker was small but well equipped. Emergency rations, water, medical supplies, communication equipment. I sealed the door behind me, engaging multiple locks that hissed as they pressurized the chamber. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Emergency purge initiated. Even through the thick walls of the bunker, I felt the vibration as the facility's purge system activated. The lights flickered momentarily, then stabilized. On a monitor mounted to the wall, I could see security feeds from the facility above. Corridors filled with fire as the purge system incinerated everything in its path. For hours, I watched the destruction unfold. The purge was thorough, designed to sterilize every inch of the facility in case of a biohazard outbreak. Flames swept through laboratories, living quarters, and common areas, leaving nothing but ash in their wake. When the fires finally died down, the automated systems began atmospheric scrubbing, removing smoke and contaminants from whatever portions of the facility remained intact. According to the bunker's environmental sensors, the air above was now clean, free of both smoke and the organism's aerosol form. But I wasn't convinced it was gone. The communication equipment in the bunker was functional, connected to a separate power supply and a dedicated satellite uplink that had escaped the facility's information quarantine. I sent emergency messages to Arctic Frontier Innovations headquarters, to military contacts from my service days, to anyone who might listen. Most responses were skeptical. A few promised to send investigation teams when weather permitted. None seemed to grasp the urgency of the situation. 3 days after the purge, I ventured out of the bunker. The facility was a charred ruin, still smoldering in places despite the sub-zero temperatures that had returned after the fires died. I moved cautiously through blackened corridors, searching for any sign that the organism had survived. In what had once been Core Lab 1, I found it, a small patch of iridescent film no larger than a coin, pulsing faintly in a crevice that had somehow been protected from the worst of the flames. As I watched, it quivered, stretching toward me as if sensing my presence. I destroyed it with a portable flamethrower from the emergency equipment cache, watching until every last trace was consumed. But deep down, I knew it was futile. If even this tiny amount had survived the purge, there would be more, hidden in air ducts, sealed rooms, the frozen ground beneath the facility. I returned to the bunker and sealed myself in, sending more urgent messages, attaching the video I'd taken of the surviving organism. This time, the responses came faster, with promises of immediate action. A week later, I heard the rumble of approaching vehicles. Through the bunker's external cameras, I saw a convoy of military transports approaching across the ice, hazmat teams deployed, surrounding the ruined facility with clinical efficiency. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt only a creeping dread. As I prepared to leave the bunker and meet the rescue team, I noticed something on my hand. A small patch of discolored skin, a faint blue-gray tinge that hadn't been there before. I stared at it, remembering Dr. Frost's words, "It will find you, Monroe. In the end, it finds everyone." Outside, the rescue team was approaching the bunker entrance. I had a choice to make: reveal my potential infection and risk being quarantined or worse, or stay silent and potentially carry the organism back to civilization. As I raised my hand to knock on the bunker door, signaling my presence to the rescue team, I watched the discoloration on my skin pulse once, synchronized perfectly with my heartbeat. And in that moment, I understood what truly lurked beneath the Arctic ice. Not just an ancient organism, but the future of humanity, for better or worse. The choice I made that day would determine not just my fate, but potentially the fate of our entire species. And as the bunker door began to open, I knew that whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The ice had given up its secret. Now